There's this great painting by Raphael, I think maybe around 1510, right at the height of the Renaissance, and a few decades before the Protestant challenge to the Catholic Church. So it was a sort of magic period there. Pope Julius II, for his library, commissioned Raphael to make these paintings that showed the integration of the West, pre-Christian West with the then current Christian West, as exemplified by the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church. And what's cool, if you look at that painting, is that they can identify many of the philosophers in that painting, but there's one figure that is never identified. And the figure's rather large and very close to Aristotle. And to me, looks very much like a Western Buddhist monk. He's got a shaved head, he's got an orange robe. Now, it's unintentional, but symbolically, see, that painting is called the School of Athens nowadays. Famous, one of the most famous
I recall
canonical paintings of the West. That painting was supposed to represent the integration of all the world's philosophies with Christianity. The idea being that Christianity doesn't appear in the painting, but it's implied symbolically. So the idea was that, well, there's all there's the greatness of ancient Greece, and we can see, if we want, a unity there. Aristotle is gesturing a gesture of peace like this, okay, to all the people there. There it is. Isn't that a cool picture? You can show it on the podcast.
Yep.
So, oh yeah, this is great. Can I make it larger? Yeah, okay, check it out. There's Aristotle, and some people say he's pointing to the earth, and Plato is pointing to the ideals, in heaven. Yeah. But it's known from Roman iconography that gesture with the hand out like that was a gesture of peace. So he's sort of saying we can integrate all this. Now, Heraclitus here, who has the face of Michelangelo, he is he's on this block here, not even paying attention to it. And there's a metaphor from the Old Testament about the block of stone that was everyone ignored, and then they finally just realized it was so central. That actually stands for Christianity in this, and that's well-established iconography. So the idea is Aristotle is sort of saying we can integrate all of these philosophies, and you'll notice that they have a Muslim, Averroes, where is he? Right over here, you see the turban. And Zoroaster is actually over here, this guy. So there is, from the Middle East, it's not just Greece. So what I always imagine is that that this guy here, take a look. He's got an orange robe and a shaved head. He looks very much to me like what a Western Theravada monk would look like. Okay? Yeah. So I always, I'm sure Raphael didn't know, but who knows? Artists can see in the dark. They can, sometimes they channel stuff that even they don't know. To me, that represents what they were really lacking. What they were really lacking was the knowledge of systematic training of attention. That was so well developed in India, better than anywhere in the world, and then influenced China and then the rest of Asia. So in my mind, the great unification is that it would include meditation techniques drawn from India, for example, from Buddhism, from Southeast Asia, the Satipatthana, which is the basis of this modern mindfulness movement that is now taking root in the West. So I see this as applying 500 years, almost to the decade, 500 years later. Can I show one other thing there? So remember that in this traditional iconography, the logos, as in the Gospel of John in the beginning, was the word, the plan that God had from the beginning. So Heraclitus was the first to use the word logos to mean sort of the deep principle of nature. So they have Heraclitus like literally leaning on the Christian logos without realizing it. Okay, that was the message. But I take this block to mean something else, okay? This, of course, is my personal reading or interpretation. To me, what a block represents is two squares that are connected. And in my mind, when I think of science, I think of the scientific method. And there are 4 elements to the scientific method: mathematical description, let's just say, description, asking interesting questions in the form of a hypothesis, doing experiments, analyzing data. So when I think of the scientific method, I think of this square. So to me, the other thing that was missing was Aristotle had started science, but he never completed science because he didn't know about the experimental method. So in my mind, when I see that picture, the block to me represents modern science.
Sure.
And then the guy in the orange robes represents the Eastern meditative tradition. And then we have the whole Western canon. And I see that the modern mindfulness movement is in fact the convergence that Raphael was symbolizing to Pope Julius II of, we can have all this. You want to see?
This is the opportunity we have now, right?
Yeah,
like the opportunity we have now is
point.
to bring all of this together in a way that we never have before, because our ability to communicate and travel and access these bodies of knowledge and advance these bodies of knowledge with our own practice, experience, and that kind of Da Vinci effect, as Robert Greene says, where you're drawing on multiple different disciplines to actually improve the singular discipline that you've had, so that art
That's
can
an
inform
interesting
math.
phrase. I am not familiar with that.
Yeah, the Da Vinci effect is what Robert Greene talks about.
I am not familiar with Robert Greene.
Yeah, he wrote a book called Mastery, and really, he was saying that one of the reasons why Da Vinci was so masterful was his breadth of knowledge of so many different disciplines.
Fascinating.
And how he would be able to use those disciplines to improve the primary discipline. And that's something that he advises for everybody. He said, like, the more you know about the world, like, don't just focus on the one thing singularly that you can do. The more you learn about other elements, like in this painting, all of the other ideas, philosophies, canons, all of that, the more that it can enhance your primary discipline by drawing in the wisdom.
Maybe that's why I've been successful.
Yeah.
I do the meditation, but I also have the math and science background.
That's great. And so you're embodying that kind of convergence, which actually enhances both. Like the way that you're able to formulaically describe these things is, in my mind, an advancement of the understanding of the field, and that come from harnessing some of your mathematical scientific background.
So I have a question. Is this an influential book?
It is.
And when you for what community, what types of people would tend to read that?
Well, he also wrote a book called The 48 Laws of Power, which was one of the most widespread books for entrepreneurs, businessmen, athletes, anybody. I mean, that was probably his breakout book, and he's been one of the top best-selling authors for a long time.
Really?
So this is,
so I'm taking notes here. Because this is very interesting. Well, because this is profoundly true, what you just said. Having a name for it is kind of cool. Can we get the School of Athens back? Because you mentioned Da Vinci. I'm going to show you something.
Cool.
So what Raphael did is he populated this with actual people that lived in the Italian Renaissance times. It's well known that Heraclitus is sort of his rival, Michelangelo.
Mm-hmm.
That's the face of Michelangelo, it's believed to be. But if you look carefully at Plato, he has the face of Leonardo da Vinci. And by the way, Raphael himself is in the picture, hiding over here in the corner, and it's so clever. If you, let's see here, where is it?
There he is right there, right?
You're getting close. That's right. That's right where I'm pointing. See this guy? He's looking at the viewer of the picture.
Collapsing the fourth wall.
And if you look at the look on his face, he's saying, look what I did. What do you think? Okay. Let me show you something else. Okay. It's just like so cool. So Da Vinci is actually here. That's Plotinus. So let me show you this one, apropos of a more modern way of thinking. See this very central woman?
Uh-huh.
I mean, she definitely gets your attention, right?
Yep.
So that's Hypatia, who is a famous woman philosopher of the late antiquity, right when Christianity was coming to ascendance. And she was well-versed in all of the pagan philosophy, math, and so forth. She was a formidable enemy of Christianity. And she was murdered by a Christian mob. And Raphael wanted to put her in the painting.
Mm-hmm.
And the authorities at the Vatican said, no, you can't put her. And it was probably prejudice against women. But it was also this other stuff.
Right.
So you know what he did? He claimed that's a guy, and he put a relative of the Pope's face on it. But that's Hypatia. Okay? And he's flipping subtly to his patron, right?
Right.
How cool is that?
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And it's proto-feminist in a sense.
Well, and as I was saying, like this is now the world that we get to live in and draw on all these beliefs. But there's one thing. So I want to talk to you another thing. When we're talking about happiness, I read a blog post that you did, and it was kind of taking the concept of like a loving kindness meditation and using that, and you turn that into a nurture positivity.
Oh, that's just my name for it.
That's just your name.
That's just a name.
So that idea of nurturing positivity, the actual, the active, intentional inculcation of joy and of feelings of positivity, right? And it's this intentional practice, because I think a lot of times we think that these feelings, good feelings, just come like something wafting on the breeze that you have no control over and you can just smell it or not, But it's one of the great lessons is the ability to create, yourself, these feelings, and bring those forward. And I think that's some of the idea of that loving kindness. And then, I think your idea of the nurture positivity and the way you broke it down was really cool.
Well,
so actually, I want to get into that.
Let me show you something.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I'm going to just pull it up.
Sure.
It just happens that Juliana and I were discussing this, so I have it with me. We were so I like to classify things.
Mm-hmm.
So what I wanted to do, this probably won't show on the camera, but I can send something to you.
Cool.
That you can whatever. But I created this thing I call Ultra, the Universal Library for Training Attention. Mm-hmm. And you'll see that it's divided into 4 quadrants. So I group all the meditation techniques that have ever existed into these 4 basic quadrants of training. Now, what's interesting and I believe, if I do say so myself, rather elegant about this, is that all of these are unified. I call my approach unified mindfulness for this reason. All of these are unified in the sense that we can show that every one of these forms of meditation practice develops the same core attentional skills. So there's something generic to all meditative traditions, East or West, ancient or modern. On the other hand, they do represent different quadrants, different things you can do. So in this quadrant that I call appreciation, you more or less just pay attention to whatever comes up. And some people equate mindfulness with that, but for me, mindfulness is much broader. Over here is perceptual transcendence. What that means is you find a formless but complete source that precedes, follows, and pervades everything that you see, hear, or feel on the inside or outside. So some people call that no self, some people call that true self, some people call it emptiness, some people call it God, some people call it nature. Some techniques involve sort of just observing whatever comes up. Some techniques involve direct pointing to that primordial completeness that's in your perceptual sense gates. Now, another thing that we can do is we can find that same completeness in your motor senses, in your movement, in your speech, even in how you think. Sometimes you probably had the experience of an action just happening of its own, and it was magic, creative, maybe saved your life. There was a kind of just happeningness to how you moved. Or something came up and some words just came through you and it was just the right thing.
Sure.
There was just happeningness. You didn't speak it. It's self-organized. That's the primordial completeness or primordial perfection that underlies all movement, speech, thought, and so forth. So you can discover something like the perceptual flow, formless flow, in your motor circuits. That's a direct pointing to sort of the source of your actions. This is a direct pointing to the source of your perception. But yet, there's yet one other thing that you can do. You can intentionally create positive habits of action in your thoughts, your emotions, and your behavior by nurturing positivity. So all of these ways of training contrast with each other, yet they're all unified in that they develop the same core skill set. I can show you that for every way of working, whether it's just observing what is, or whether it's a direct pointing to primordial completeness that underlies perception, or the direct pointing to something like that that underlies your actions, or intentionally cultivating habits of positive thought, positive emotion, making positive behavior changes by, say, visualizing perfect performance or visualizing recovery from substance or food issues and so forth. These different ways of working are in contrast, but from another perspective, they all entail the development and application of a very simple attentional skill set.
Yeah.
So it's quite elegant, really.